Read the disclaimers. And please use common sense.
Welcome to MachiNightly News at 9 with hosts Philharmon-X and Cheri-Yuken.
For crying out loud, I don't turn into a Cybertruck. Psst, we're on. Good evening and welcome to MachiNightly News at 9. We're your hosts, Philharmon-X and Cheri-Yuken, and our top story tonight is the near imminent destruction of our home planet, Machina.
That's right, Phil, and later we'll be hearing from Silver Spine on the conflict between the warlord Emerald Tempest and Amber Mountain. And then Legshark will give us an exclusive interview with Red Blitz regarding the harassment allegations he's leveled against the Autobot Sideburn. But for now, we hand the mic and our feed off to our reporter Musclehyde.
Thank you, Cheri. This is Musclehyde, reporting live from the Speranza lunar launch site. And as you can see, the planet is glowing purple. Now, while it's true that the machinasium ore that comprises a sizable portion of Machina's surface is naturally purple, this shade in particular, described by experts as lean, is not the sign of a healthy planet. According to Cybertronian scientist Haxus, our planet's days may be far more numbered than we expected. That's all for now, but we'll be back soon with updates. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Musclehyde.
That happened a lot sooner than I expected.
Of the internet, I trust you've been keeping well, and that you enjoyed my review of Metal Cardbot Steelhook, especially because it seems as though Metal Cardbot is all I want to talk about these days. I'm genuinely not sure if this came across in the final product, but that video was a labor of love. Playing with Steelhook, scratch that, the Metal Cardbot toy line as a whole genuinely lit a spark in me that I thought died a long time ago. A spark of passion for not just transforming robot action figures, but also the spark of passion that I had for making toy review videos when I started this channel. The one that I lost in the immediate aftermath of releasing my Kingdom Air Razor video. I've tried to rediscover that spark of passion since that video released, and in fact I thought I almost found it with the Beastbox line back in 2023 after I graduated college. I had a whole plan to refocus the channel on the aspects of transforming robot toys that made them great fidgets for people to focus with. I planned to begin it with a whole entire review marathon talking about the first combiner I had ever completed, 5-2 Toys Beastbox Massive Attacka, and it got really far along into production, so far in fact that I was able to make a little trailer to tease the series. I was so proud of it that I showed it to Dr. Lockdown and said I was gonna release it, but to this day I am extremely glad that he told me not to do that. I've ultimately fallen out of love with Beastbox to the point where I don't think I'll ever be able to review another figure from the line again. The cost to figure ratio is worst on Beastbox figures, not to mention most of them have a lot of joints that are so tight that they make unbearable squeaky noises, and some of them are just so complicated to transform that they're not fun. I went back to Transformers because their prices were fairer and also they were more fun for me. But I didn't see any point in reviewing any of them because the good figures weren't good enough to be interesting, and the bad ones weren't bad enough for me to find any amusement in insulting them. To me, Transformers had begun to feel stagnant. Sure, I can say stuff about them, but where's the fun in saying the same thing over and over and over again? And then this year we went from stagnation to full-on regression. I hope you like the mix of continuities we had over the past few years, because now we're just going back to mostly G1, and we're making about 1 billion more G1 Optimus Primes because we at Hasbro believe that being stuck in the past is the future.
I certainly wouldn't say that I was stuck in a rut. Stuck in a rut. Stuck in a rut.
Please, Hasbro, can we have some other continuities?
Stuck in a rut. Stuck in a rut.
No? Oh, God.
Stuck in a rut. Stuck in a rut.
Oh, no, Mr. Bull's stuck again.
Stuck in a rut.
I want new ideas, I want new characters, and I want new character designs that aren't primarily based on a terrible animation model from the 80s. But instead of that, we're getting an apology tour for the death of a fictional character that happened 40 years ago. And mind you, that was a movie that sent the franchise into a downward spiral until the 90s when Beast Wars brought it back. The same Beast Wars that is celebrating its 30th anniversary and is being completely ignored by Hasbro. But that's why I'm glad I discovered Metal Cardbot when I did. Instead of despairing over the present or burying myself in the past, I can look forward. And boy howdy am I looking forward today, because this figure isn't going to be out in the West for a while. Release-wise, we're jumping ahead an entire year to Metal Cardbot S, where the figures get bigger, the alt modes get wackier, and the overall quality of the line increases by leaps and bounds you couldn't even imagine. Salutations, denizens of the internet. I'm Firebite27, and let us commence our analysis of Metal Cardbot S Musclehyde. And already you may have more than a few questions. Who is this crane truck? And why in the fresh hell did you spend the first minute and a half of this video parodying an old LEGO stop motion video? Well, to answer my straw man's questions in the order he asked them in, Musclehyde is a character from the second season of Metal Cardbot, where he and a crew of 3 others were picked by the godlike mother computer of the Metal Cardbots, Deus Machina, to pilot the Speranza, a big-ass freight ship-looking craft carrying over 2 billion Metal Cardbots sealed in their card modes. Their mission was to find a new homeworld for all the Metal Cardbots to inhabit since, you know, their current homeworld Machina was under threat of going kaboom at any second. But when they learned about Machina's destruction, one member of the crew ended up trying to steer the ship around and ended up crashing it into Earth. And that meant they had to get friendly with some of the early humans of our planet. No, not that early. This group of early humans was known as the Porkaka tribe, and their settlement, the Porkaka village, would play host to the Metal Cardbots. And chief among these humans was a noble man by the name of Mukara, who had a vision for humans and Metal Cardbots to share the same planet, a vision that he shared with the leader of the group, Gigant Rex. Sadly, this was a vision that was impossible for them to manifest, as Earth 4,000 years ago didn't exactly have many electrical sockets for them to recharge with. Having been gifted the Metal Brace S that had been given to Gigant Rex in order to release all 2 billion Cardbots upon finding a new home planet, Mukara was forced to seal his alien allies within stone tablets. As for why the intro parodied Nightly News at 9, that's because I am both nostalgic for it, and also because Musclehyde started out as a reporter on Machina, which leads to him humorously interviewing things and people. Honestly, it's rather adorable. Anywho, with the fluff finally out of the way, let's get on to talking about the actual figure itself because, oh man, this is just nice. And I don't just mean that as an offhand statement of quality, even though it's a nice object. No, what I mean is that from dead on and from most angles that tilt it to the side, he's very friend-shaped. Sure, from the side it looks like a mostly normal crane truck, but when I look into his eyes, I just can't help but smile. Okay, that was definitely not the kind of smile I was talking about, but hey, more power to you. I meant the kind of smile you make when you see something cute, like a puppy, or the cast of Smiling Friends. But I think the eye shape is definitely doing the heavy lifting here. No pun intended. Especially when the crane arm can't do any heavy lifting. While I and many others will sing the praises of the Metal Cardbot line for its use of ratchet joints, I'd be failing my responsibility to my audience as a critic if I wasn't somewhat objective. So while it is true that each individual Metal Cardbot figure with its symphony of tight ratchet joints puts every single release from the past few trilogies to shame, there are definitely some imperfections. For one, the ratchet joint central to the whole assembly is capable of holding up the crane arm itself, but get it to hold anything bigger than a Legion or Legends class figure and it'll crumple under the weight. Quite frankly, that's a bit ridiculous, especially when figures that are much smaller and lighter than Musclehyde can support his full weight on their friction joints. Not to mention this slight issue where if you try to extend the crane arm, you might accidentally pull it off altogether. But I'm willing to give it a pass because it slides back in just as easily. On the nitpicky side, the space within the hook is also pretty small, so you're either going to need figures with perfectly shaped parts that the hook can fit under, figures that also have hooks built into their design, or figures with weird inconvenient and sticky outy bits that are the perfect size to fit inside the hook in the first place. And that's not the only minor nitpick I have with the crane arm. While the crane arm assembly has about as much articulation as one could ask for, 360-degree rotation at the base, extension, and of course vertical movement, I selfishly wish the vertical movement had a bit more range, like pushing back the arm far enough that it stands bolt upright. All that said, it's probably not the biggest issue you've noticed with the figure. If you've noticed, you're probably jonesing for me to address the elephant in the room, and if you haven't noticed it, well, color my ghast well and truly flabbered. You may have noticed there's some big ol' hinges underneath the eyes, and one of those hinges has a big old chunk missing from it. Now, part of me wants to say I should have seen that coming, considering the box it was shipped in looked like this when it arrived, but I also could have broken it the first time I tried transforming it. See, when you go into robot mode, the correct order of operations is folding down these panels that form the top of the cab and the eyeballs. Then you can fold the feet out. But that's not what I did when I first transformed this figure. I forced the feet out, and that might have ended up breaking off the panel. Now, fortunately, I was able to fix it in the end, forcing the pin back into the figure, but at the same time, it did leave behind a substantial scar. At the end of the day, I'm not counting this as a mark against the figure, mostly because, well, I genuinely don't know who bears more responsibility here when it comes to the breakage. Was it me being the dunderhead, or was it because the package was beaten more thoroughly than that dead horse everyone's talking about? But that's enough negatives, I feel. Let's get into some positives. For one, Musclehyde is a dream to roll around, a quality he owes to his use of pinned wheels and his incredibly nice weight. Yippee! And fortunately, that's a recurring feature of all Metal Cardbots that have wheels. Wait a minute, these song lyrics don't have anything to do with driving a car. Oh right, Rickrolling, I get it. And as I stated earlier, this vehicle mode has something of a strong personality. And on the whole, it suits Musclehyde as a character very well. Musclehyde may look like he's big, strong, and mean, but underneath the intimidation factor, he's a big ol' softie. You can say the same about real-world crane trucks. They are big, and they are strong, and that kind of makes them intimidating, but you know what we mostly use them for? Building and construction. And both of those are antitheses to the intimidating prospects of destruction that large size and great strength carry with them. This is something I really didn't notice until I started playing with the Metal Cardbots, but Transformer alternate modes rarely suit their personalities. For example, Windcharger is a car because he is a car. Optimus Prime is a truck because he has always been a truck. Seaspray doesn't turn into a hovercraft because he wants to be one, he turns into a hovercraft because that's what the G1 toy was. And Horrible turns into a monster because they ran out of Diaclone toys to import. And maybe ride the coattails of Ghostbusters while we're at it? For the record, I hate Ghostbusters, but I'm not one to turn down the opportunity for making obvious jokes.
Zoom, motherfucker, zoom!
And while on the whole, Metal Cardbot personalities are a bit better matched to their alternate modes than Transformers, such as the relaxed Explorer, Glowberg, getting a Jeep-like vehicle so he can explore off-road terrain, their eyes rarely express any other emotion than steely determination. The vehicle modes from the Season 1 cast in particular look really pissed off with you for some reason. What did I do to deserve this? Whatever it is, I'm very sorry for it, just please stop looking at me like that. But that's not the vibe I get from Musclehyde's eyes. I get curiosity, I get wonder, and maybe even a little bit of silly clumsiness in there. And if it weren't obvious enough, I like the eyeballs on the alternate modes for Metal Cardbot figures, in every situation. Is it a bit silly and childish that every single car looks like it wants you to take it very seriously, Mom? Oh, absolutely, but I'd argue that's nowhere even close to being a bad thing. At the end of the day, these toys are for kids, and if kids think that the eyeballs on vehicles are cool, who am I to stop them? In fact, who's to say I'm not allowed to join them in saying that they're cool? I'm not trying to make you feel self-conscious about your opinion. If you disagree about this whole eyeball thing, that's totally fine. But it is my place to tell you whether or not I personally think that these toys are worth your time and, more importantly, your money. And while I'd say that so far Metal Cardbot has figures that meet these criteria in spades, Musclehyde may just be one of the best. Especially because he is way bigger than Steelhook, and his robot mode is way better too. But first, let's do a few size comparisons, because despite the fact that he is bigger than a Unicron Trilogy Voyager, I don't think he's quite graduated to being a Unicron Trilogy leader. Let's say Ultra class for now. Yeah, maybe you'll get a better idea for how big this figure is if I show you some size comparisons. Here he is next to my last review, Season 1 Steelhook, a standard deluxe class, Age of the Primes Quintus Prime, a standard Voyager, SS-86 Thundercracker, a standard Leader, SS-86 Swoop, a standard Commander class, Transformers Legacy Evolution Armada Optimus Prime, a fellow Crane Truck Iron Factory Grapple, Metal Cardbot's Mech Tackle, Metal Cardbot's Bluster Gale, Metal Cardbot's Buffalo Crush, Metal Cardbot Shadow X, Metal Cardbot Red Blitz, Metal Cardbot Season 1 Blue Star, or Blue Cop, whichever one you prefer, Metal Cardbot Glober, Metal Cardbot Cielo, or Gio, I don't know how to pronounce her name, or his name, whatever, Metal Cardbot Flash Vector, Metal Cardbot Sparkbeat, Metal Cardbot Gigant Rex, Metal Cardbot Rock Crush, Metal Cardbot Deep Bite, Musclehyde's Metal Card, HasLab RID 2000 Optimus Prime, and of course a standard Qtama, standard Cam Sparkling Water, and a standard G1 Minibot. Alrighty, time to get onto the robot mode, I suppose.
My own writing, like tiny insects in the palm of history. A domino.
You know what? At this point, you've got my full permission to bring back the sexy saxophone music.
Oh, yes.
While making my toys look provocative generally makes me uncomfortable because, you know, action figures are primarily for kids. To all of y'all in my audience who fancy the buff menfolk, you have my full permission to simp away for this one. Especially because, okay, this is gonna sound weird, but I'm kinda there with you on this one. I've never really been a big fan of the whole muscle-bound meathead aesthetic. Prince Adam and He-Man, hated it, never a fan. Baki grossed the hell out of me, and Bandai's super buff Power Ranger action figures always made me facepalm because they never look like that in the show. Except for that one time in Mystic Force where the Green Ranger suit inexplicably morphed into a Chippendales dancer. I think what ends up making the difference here is the fact that it's made out of metal and so geometric. It looks like body armor. Like I said before, it's a problem I've had with every character that goes with a super muscular aesthetic. Unless it's Superman, my immediate thoughts upon seeing a muscular superhero aren't the idea that they're super strong, but concern that they're not impervious to normal things like guns and knives. Apart from Kryptonians, the only characters that I thought could pull off this look for the longest time were the Pillar Men from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but Musclehyde's armored look proved it can work for other characters, and it proved I can actually enjoy this aesthetic. These are literal labs of steel that neither a blade nor bullet in the universe can pierce. This makes quite the mockery of literally every other figure in my collection that's trying to look muscular. They all cower in fear of this figure. My point is, if you'll forgive the obvious pun, Musclehyde has a strong look. But the funniest thing about this whole buff musclehead aesthetic to me is that it's not even who he really is. It's kinda just a facade, to the point where I'm actually not convinced he even asked to be a beefed out deadlifter and he was just literally built that way. He's built like the athlete or model that most news stations drool at the mouth to interview, but in reality, Musclehide's the one giving the interview. All that said, I can't help but feel I've been deceiving you with how tall this figure actually is. Don't get me wrong, this figure is big, much bigger than 90% of retail releases from Transformers these days. But at the same time, it's not massive enough to be a real centerpiece for your collection, you know? It's shorter than my biggest HasLab figures. Modern Commander class figures still dwarf it even without their vanity height. And size-wise, this ain't even the zenith of Metal Cardbots. Mind you, the biggest Metal Cardbot we know about so far is Tyrant Zero, who in his fully combined God of Destruction mode is twice as tall as the Metal Cardbot Blast Train, a toy which is already 3 times the size of Earthrise Optimus Prime. What I mean is, don't let me sell this figure to you solely on the basis of its size. Especially because while I did describe it as Ultra Class in size, I don't actually have that many Ultra Class figures to compare it to, but I have plenty of others such as Black Hook, Quintus Prime, Thundercracker, Swoop, Armada Optimus Prime, Iron Factory Samurai Grapple, Mech Tackle, Bluster Gale, Buffalo Crush, Shadow X, Red Blitz, Blue Cop, Glober, Sierra, Flash Vector, Sparkbit, Gigant Rex, Rock Crush, Deep Bite, his Metal Card, HasLab Optimus Prime, a standard Qtama, standard Cam Sparkling Water, and a G1 Minibot. Do you maybe get what I mean now by overselling the size? I don't know. It's definitely bigger than modern figures, but it's not giant. Now, does the size magically make the $58 I spent on this figure plus the shipping and handling worth it? Or have I duped myself into overpaying for a kid's toy? again. Now, the subject was a bit easier to approach last episode because it was the American release. I didn't really have to worry about shipping, handling, and import fees because Agabus already handled those. But I've imported all of my Metal Cardbot S figures so far from China via AliExpress, and that ups the cost slightly. That makes determining whether or not I paid a fair price for these figures murky water, to say the least. I'll be honest, it's not really the kind of thing that I think about all that often. Now, in this particular instance, there is a bit of a problem. Metal Cardbot doesn't come from the USA, it comes from South Korea. And while I do have family that comes from South Korea, I'm not exactly fluent in Korean. Not to mention that most of them don't live in South Korea currently. So asking them to be a primary source on how much Metal Cardbot costs over in Korea and how that compares to the US prices just isn't feasible. And sadly, as much as I'd love to go over to South Korea both for a general visit and to research the subject further, unfortunately travel these days is just prohibitively expensive. And as such, I'd like to take this opportunity to briefly thank YouTube's very own KR-Brickbot for answering a lot of my questions. He directed me to namu.wiki, which is a website that has a lot of information on Metal Cardbot and the toy prices. So to the best of my understanding, this is the situation when it comes to transforming robots in Korea. As I understand it, the transforming robot toy lines in Korea are far more numerous than they are over here. In the USA, Hasbro has a monopoly on the concept, but in South Korea, not only is there Metal Cardbot, but there's also Miniforce, and Hello Carbot, and Tobot. And you know what that makes it?
It's just a little bit of friendly competition.
Here in the US, Hasbro can afford to compromise on the quality of their releases year after year because, well, they've cornered the market on the transforming robot toy lines. But if you compromise on quality in the South Korean transforming robot toy market, you will be eaten alive. Combine that with the Eastern quality sells mentality, and you've got a lot of great products being sold at reasonable prices. And that arms race to see who can provide the best quality transforming robot action figures is part of why Hasbro and the Transformers brand doesn't seem to exist in South Korea.
Wait, is that true?
As far as I'm aware, yeah. Hasbro's been shittifying the Transformer toys for a while now. It makes sense that they'd be forced out of the niche that they once pioneered because they aren't offering a quality product in the same ballpark as their competition. Granted, the validity of those statements is questionable because, again, I don't live in South Korea or speak Korean, but thanks to KR-Brickbot giving me that link to namu.wiki, I at least have enough knowledge to tell you that Musclehyde at Korean retail costs about 55,000 won. And while I know that sounds like a lot of money on paper, that's actually just 2 cents shy of $36 in USD. Now, on paper, that makes the $58 I paid for it on AliExpress sound like a bit of a raw deal, but don't forget, I imported this from China and a lot of that money went into its shipping and mishandling. Musclehyde and all of the Metal Cardbots that I've imported from AliExpress have been curiosities from the Far East, things that aren't available en masse at US retailers. So of course, if I don't want to wait until Agabus imports it for a much more competitive price, which as a quick reminder might not happen for a full year, I'm gonna have to pay those import fees. That all said, if you really want to get this for a good price, I'd say patience is a virtue. When it comes to the bots from the first season, I'm more than willing to practice what I'm preaching right now, especially now that Agabus is releasing the second wave. But here's the thing, I'm willing to pay those import fees if it means getting a quality figure, and I'm willing to pay more for a figure that not only has good articulation, but a gimmick as well. It's like the Unicron trilogy, where all the figures in the line share a gimmick, but at the same time, no two figures share an identical execution for that gimmick. Glober gets a whip, Shadow X gets a shuriken, Deep Bite gets a trident/sniper rifle, Red Blitz gets Cyberpunk Air Jordans, and an inordinate number of them get breastplates. Like, this isn't even half of them. But for every one that gets a breastplate, there's at least 2 that get something wacky like rollerblades, or a T-Rex head arm cannon, and Musclehyde gets one of the best metal card weapons. His standard weapon is the crane arm from vehicle mode, albeit turned around so this weird spiky bit is facing forward. In universe, it's probably for bludgeoning people, but it honestly looks more like a toothbrush, and I don't know what you'd use that for. Give Repugnus's chompers a good clean, but thanks to the metal card, not only can we attach an axe head to the crane arm, but we can also attach 2 additional arms to his back via the crane truck assembly. I'll be blunt, the axe and arms are totally phenomenal. Or phenomenal. Screw it, I'm leaving that one in. Not only do they have more joints than the regular arms, but they give Musclehyde some serious aura. And I don't just mean the internet slang, I also mean the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And he in no small part owes that all to his backpack. Now, to an extent, I think it's safe to say that backpacks on Transformers are a wee bit divisive, especially when the backpack comprises a majority of the steps in the transformation. And I get why, as it sort of breaks the illusion that the vehicle mode and the robot mode are two separate objects, but they can be beneficial, as a lot of good figures with great weapon storage have used backpacks very effectively. But Musclehyde's backpack is not only essential to his gimmick, but also, I feel, to his silhouette. The extra mass back there makes him feel softer somehow. Maybe because it looks like an outdoorsy camping backpack? I'd say the shoulder pads are also very essential to his silhouette, even if they have a tendency to impede the articulation somewhat. And speaking of articulation, man, this is the good stuff. Not only do we have a ball-jointed head with greater range than most Chug figures, but the side sections of the crane arm assembly act as universal shoulder joints for the extra arms on the metal card weapon. Though I suppose given their placement relative to the head, it would be more appropriate to call them universal clavicle joints. The standard shoulder joints for the mechanical arms also have the same universal movement as in the normal shoulders, including bicep rotations and elbow bends. The additional arms also have two joints at each finger and a wonderfully smooth friction joint wrist swivel. The entire assembly still sports a wonderful 360-degree turntable movement, and the shoulder pads sport a hinge that gets them out of the way on top of a shoulder shrugging joint. Yes, I know they're both for the transformation, but they still count. Hot rod shoulders, or trigger happy shoulders if you want to piss off perspective end, bicep swivels, and an elbow bend so deep that you'd assume it was double jointed. It's not, there's just one joint. A wrist swivel on a soft ratchet joint, a ratcheted waist swivel so intense that it puts the fear of God in my atheist heart, hinges at the skirt flaps at the front and back, a simply ludicrous leg spread, ratcheted thigh swivels, ratcheted universal hip movement, ratcheted double bend at the knees, and get this, two fully separate and fully ratcheted ankle rockers. Musclehyde's articulation is incredibly expressive, as I've demonstrated throughout this video, and the metal card weapon really makes him distinct from any other Transformer. Well, legally distinct anyways. It's just an axe head and two additional limbs, but for some reason, when Musclehyde dons them, they give him a far mightier miasma of strength and power. And hey, despite not having 5mm ports like the regular arms, the metal card weapon arms can still totally hold the axe thanks to some proprietary ports. Granted, his extra arms can't hold the axe the right way round, but this is still literally some of the coolest shit I've ever seen from a transforming robot toy. Not that I think he'd use that strength for anything other than self-defense, and that's because Musclehyde strikes me as more of a lover than a fighter. And that's probably because Metal Cardbots aren't meant to be strictly heroes or villains. Where Transformers usually portrays the Autobots and Decepticons in black and white terms of good and evil, Metal Cardbot doesn't have any factions that could be simplified down to terms of black and white morality. Does that mean every Cardbot is innocent? Not even remotely. Some do form criminal organizations. And Heavy Iron's evil enough that he's gained a reputation as an outlaw across the universe. Metal Cardbots aren't robots in disguise. They're people who are giant and can turn into vehicles. Metal Cardbot humanizes each and every member of its cast. They aren't loyal to some vague cause like the Autobots and Decepticons. They're people with goals, hopes, dreams, who bicker and fight with each other occasionally. And maybe that's why I've been so enthusiastic for Metal Cardbot lately. This is something I don't really talk about a lot since this is a toy channel, not an anime channel, but I'm a huge fan of slice of life anime. Shows where the focus isn't on world-ending threats or anything so dramatic. They are shows about normal people living normal lives even when they don't live in a normal world. I'm especially fond of The Demon Girl Next Door because it has the very ripe gag of being a series where the very abnormal and extraordinary magical girls and demons fighting is a mundane part of everyday life. Although maybe that's because Shamiko finding out she's different from literally everyone else around her, and how much that increases the difficulty of her life and how much it sucks really hits closer to home for my neurodivergent experience than I'd like to admit. The point I'm trying to make is that I like seeing people act like people, and I find that especially entertaining when they're not normal people. What was life like on Machina before the Metal Cardbots came to Earth? It was probably a lot like yours and mine, filled with the same mundane anxieties, but also some of the mundane triumphs that make life worth living. And to me, that's inherently more compelling than any old story about good versus evil. And the fact that Musclehyde effectively communicates that message about Metal Cardbots is a big part of why I love him, but I also love him because he's a mechanical minotaur that turns into an android Ashura. He isn't like any other Metal Cardbot, but also there's no other Metal Cardbot quite like him. Which, real talk, you can't say about Transformers, can you? Now, I would not recommend that you try this as your first Metal Cardbot, as my top picks for first impressions are Glober and Steelhook, and before I say literally anything else, let me emphasize this. If you want to get this figure and you're okay with waiting for a year, do that. I'm a fool who got impatient and paid premium prices to get these figures early. If you practice the patience I'm preaching here, then trust me, your finances are gonna thank you for it. That said, importing this figure was my choice, and I can't say that I'm regretting it all that much. We'll see if Tacky can get me to echo that sentiment in a few days, but for now, Musclehyde is a fantastic, and I highly recommend him with a hearty 8.5 out of 10. Man, I've missed being able to do that. Sorry it took me a while to reintroduce the scoring system. I'm afraid I lost a majority of the assets I used to make these videos back when my computer crapped out a few years back, and considering I didn't make all that many videos last year, I kinda forgot to remake all of them. I also lost Broadside, which is why Cosmos took his place as the last size comparison, but I've since found him, so you can look forward to seeing him again in the next review. Unfortunately, you'll have to wait a bit longer for me to bring back Maya because I'll have to redo all of her assets from scratch. And before I go, a huge thank you to Zoe Robo on Cults 3D for designing these display stands for the metal cards. They've really helped elevate the metal cards in this video, and I owe that to Zoe for designing this item, and to my longtime collaborator and Polish pal Silverfoil for bringing this to my attention. And with all that out of the way, until next time, this is Firebite27, over and out.
Tell me something your mother doesn't know.